So I'll be talking on this topic, mannitol versus hypertonic saline. So this topic I did it as a panel discussion in Kovai Hospital in Coimbatore recently on 26th of January. So I think since it was a panel and this talk I'd given in some other conference, so I've just combined few of those, to make it more comprehensive. So the topics we would be covering is just a little bit about mannitol or osmotherapy. How does it work? And there are around 7 studies, one in stroke and 6 in TBI, comparing hypertonic saline and mannitol. So there's one meta-analysis. So we'll look at the strength and limitations of the studies and conclusions. So I think the questions I would asked to panelists was mortality, is cerebral edema important? Because we have to bear in mind that it is worrying, because anyone with cerebral edema, it has a direct correlation with the mortality, and mortality can be anywhere up to 50% depending on the severity of cerebral edema. So the question I would have asked panelists is what are the agents that are available for osmotherapy? So right now the agents we currently use is mannitol or hypertonic saline. So glycerol was being used earlier, but we have stopped using it because there's not much evidence favoring use of glycerol. So the question I would have asked is what is the dosage of mannitol and peak action and duration, and what are the precautions that we need to undertake whilst using mannitol. So the dosage of mannitol is 20% we use. 1 gram per kg is given as a bolus, followed by 0.25 to zero point 0.5 grams per kg every 6 to 8 hourly. So the mechanism of action of mannitol, I think we need to have a little clarity. So when the mannitol obviously is given intravenously, so because it is a high osmolality, it creates the osmotic gradient, and there is a shift of fluid from the cells, neurons, into the blood vessels, so that your edema of the cells come down. And it is shown to inhibit apoptosis also, and it is known to cause free radical scavenging. So the mechanism of action, it acts within minutes after administration. So, and it attains the peak of action in 1 hour, and then the duration of action can last anywhere between 4 to 24 hours. So that is the duration. And the precautions, the question that I asked, what are the precautions we take while using mannitol? Most important is to monitor serum sodium, because the sodium can go up. Initially, there can be hyperosmolar hyponatremia, but later on the sodium will go up. So that is something we need to bear in mind. Although your sodium may be initially normal, so it may be going up because there is hyperosmolar hyponatremia that will be set in initially, and it won't be reflected. So continued usage, once you see the sodium going up, then you know the serum sodium is really high. And serum osmolality is something we need to bear in mind, and more than 320 is a situation where you may have to consider stopping or changing the therapy. And most importantly, we need to be monitoring renal function tests, because mannitol can cause acute tubular necrosis and acute kidney injury. So this is one of the dreaded side effects of mannitol, which anyone using it should be aware of. So with mannitol usage, there is something called rebound cerebral edema that happens. The way it happens is when there is a breach in blood-brain barrier, so mannitol enters the cells. Because there is a breach, when mannitol enters the cells, then obviously it creates an osmotic gradient and the fluid is drawn into the cells. So there is a worsening of cerebral edema. So that is a hypothesis as to why, if there is severe TBI, mannitol can work diabolically. So it can worsen edema also. So that is something we need to keep in mind. So, and all this we mentioned, and it can also cause shrinkage of red blood cells by reducing rigidity and cohesiveness. And another important benefit of osmo or the mannitol or any osmotherapy is it causes hypovolemia. Intravascular blood volume comes down. The reason is obviously because of its osmotic effect. It reduces the intravascular blood volume and reduces the viscosity. And the blood volume would come down possibly because of its osmolar effect, and because there is reduced viscosity, there is improvement in the oxygenation of the tissues, and improvement in the oxygenation is shown to reduce the ICP, and it is also shown to reduce CSF production also. So these are some of the other benefits of osmotherapy or mannitol in specific. So then the question I would have asked panelists is what are the adverse effects of mannitol? So as I mentioned, there is rebound increase in the intracranial pressure, especially when the blood-brain barrier is breached. Because once it breached, the mannitol can enter into the cells and it can draw the fluid from the vascular compartment into the cell and causes swelling of the cells. So that is what we need to understand. And mannitol is known to cause hemolysis. So because of the shrinkage of red blood cells, there can be breakage of cells that can happen. So it can lead to pulmonary edema. And most importantly, we need to, as I mentioned, initially there can be hyperosmolar hyponatremia, later on it leads to hypernatremia. And there can be a lot of electrolyte abnormalities. So the crux of using when monitoring is to monitor all these electrolytes. So we need to monitor sodium, potassium. There can be hypomagnesemia also and hypophosphatemia. So I would suggest if most of our traumatic brain injury who are put on some sort of an osmotherapy, it's important we monitor these magnesium, phosphorus, and potassium, and obviously sodium and renal function tests. And the most dreaded side effect of mannitol is, as I mentioned, acute kidney injury. And it is shown that mannitol is an independent risk factor for this acute kidney injury. So that is also something we need to have a bearing. So irrespective of other causes, because in ICU we understand there are so many other factors which contribute to AKI, but just the usage of mannitol is shown to have an independent risk factor for AKI. So then the question I would have asked panelists is there robust evidence to make recommendation for the use of mannitol? So this was a Hungarian meta-analysis that came in Cochrane, where they did put in all the studies of stroke patients, and they found there was absolutely no benefit in using mannitol as a routine as osmotherapy in these conditions. So now the question comes to, so we have spoken about mannitol, the side effects and how it acts. So now the question to the panelists I would have asked is whether hypertonic saline, which now seems to be the flavor, is more desired than mannitol. So which osmotic therapy is preferred? So for this we look into around 6 to 7 studies that have been done comparing hypertonic and mannitol. So this was the study which came in JAMA in 2004 by Australian group. So here they used pre-hospital hypertonic saline resuscitation with hypotension and severe traumatic brain injury. So this trial is looking at twofold. One is obviously in severe head injury there will be hypovolemia to correct hypovolemia, and also with an intent that they would reduce a little bit of cerebral edema. So this study was done between December 98 to April 2002. So the outcome they looked at was neurological function at the end of 6 months. So they took patients with GCS less than 9 and who are hypotensive, systolic blood pressure less than 100. So they had 229 patients randomized between hypertonic saline and control group. So what they found is serum sodium level in hypertonic saline was expectedly high compared to control group. That was significant. But when they looked at hospital survival, there was no difference between hypertonic saline and control group. They looked at the 6-month survival, no difference between hypertonic saline. They looked at the Glasgow outcome score at 6 months. There was no difference between hypertonic saline and control group. So the conclusions the authors made was in patients with severe traumatic brain injury and hypotension, so the neurological function at the end of 6 months, there was no difference between hypertonic saline and conservative. So this is in a pre-hospital resuscitation. So this we cannot relate to proper cerebral edema because they have looked at mortality as an endpoint, attributing it to possible edema and correction of hypotension. So as you see, this is the serum sodium level which was significant. This is the serum sodium which is significantly high in hypertonic saline, and extended Glasgow outcome score, black and gray line, you see there's no difference. So this was the older study which came from Germany looking at effect of hypertonic saline, hydroxyethyl starch. They combined hypertonic saline with hydroxyethyl starch and mannitol in patients with increased intracranial pressure after stroke. So this was a prospective study. They took only 9 patients, but they measured serial ICPs, 30 readings of ICPs they took. So and ICP more than 25 millimeter was present 22 times when they did 30 recordings, and pupillary abnormality was present in 3 times and combination around 5 times. So here they monitored ICP, blood pressure and cerebral perfusion pressure for 4 hours, and they monitored ABG, hematocrit, serum osmolality and serum sodium before administration of hypertonic saline, 15 minutes after and 60 minutes after. So they kept monitoring osmolality and sodium levels. And they found that treatment was effective in hypertonic saline, reducing ICP of more than 10%, which means it reduced ICP more than 10% in all the readings, in all the patients. So here they took 16 readings where hypertonic saline and hydroxyethyl starch was used as a osmotherapy and 14 where mannitol was used. So the treatment effectiveness was found in all patients with hypertonic saline as compared to mannitol. That was statistically significant. And the maximum ICP reduction was found more in the hypertonic saline group when compared to mannitol. And that was also statistically significant. But when they looked at cerebral perfusion pressure, there was no improvement in hypertonic saline hydroxyethyl starch. Serum osmolarity was found to be higher in hypertonic saline as compared to mannitol. And serum sodium level also was found to be high. So the conclusions authors made in this German study, which is an old study, it came in 1998, hypertonic saline hydroxyethyl starch was showed increased effectiveness in reducing ICP but failed to improve CPP, because ordinarily you would expect when the ICP comes down, your CPP should improve. So that's why I do not know whether we can subscribe much from this study, although it appears that hypertonic saline appeared superior in reducing ICP. So this was a French study which came in 2003, where they compared isovolume hypertonic saline in the treatment of refractory post-traumatic intracranial hypertension. They used 7.5%. This is what I keep telling my trainees, that all these Western studies, they've used different concentration. None of the studies I could get where they've used, there's one study which has used 3%. Otherwise, most studies have used 7.5%, at least the French studies. And they've used in combination with colloids, at least the earlier studies. So we need to look into the recent studies where they may have done only as a standalone. So this was a prospective randomized control study. So they took patients of refractory intracranial hypertension. So they defined refractory intracranial hypertension as someone where intracranial pressure was higher even after adequate sedation, after optimizing hemodynamic status, and after EVD or after CSF drainage. They did all this and still the intracranial pressures were high, so they considered them as refractory hypertension, and there they used this hypertonic or osmotherapy. So here they monitored number of intracranial hypertension episodes that patient had during the therapy, and they looked at the duration of intracranial pressures going up. So how long did the intracranial pressures remain high? And the monitoring was done for 7 plus or minus 5 days. And the failure of treatment was considered where, despite 2 doses of osmotherapy or a hypertonic saline, they found high intracranial pressure. They found that there is failure. They considered or concluded as failure of treatment. So these were the observations that authors made in this study. So they had 20 patients. So randomized between 7.5% hypertonic saline. They used at a dose of 2 ml per kg, and 20% mannitol was used as 2 ml per kg. So the mean number of infusions between these two to reduce ICP, there was no difference. But if you look at the number of episodes of intracranial hypertension, it was significantly less in hypertonic saline group compared to mannitol. 6.9 in hypertonic, 13.3 in mannitol. And the duration, so once ICP goes up, it remains high for a certain period of time. They captured the duration, and the duration was significantly less with 7.5% hypertonic saline. It was 67 plus or minus 85 minutes as compared to 131. That was also statistically significant. And treatment failure, where despite 2 doses your ICP never came down, I think that happened more in mannitol as compared to the hypertonic saline, and that was also statistically significant. So the conclusions authors made was 7.5% hypertonic saline at 2 ml per kg was more effective than 20% mannitol. So this is a 2003 French study. Then the British guys, they did this study in 2005. So it was a randomized control trial on effect of 20% mannitol. Again here if you see, they have used 7.5 saline with dextran. So as you see, the combinations have been little interesting. So they always combined saline with colloids on intracranial pressure after brain surgery. This was a prospective randomized control study. Here also they monitored ICP, blood pressure, urine output, and they monitored urine sodium and serum sodium. They monitored urine osmolarity, serum osmolarity. So they took 9 patients and 36 observations they made. So here you have hypertonic saline dextran, where the percentage is 6% dextran plus 7.5% saline, and mannitol is 20% mannitol, 200 ml over 5 minutes. If you see, the ICP median reduction was significantly more. There was 13 millimeter reduction of ICP compared to the mannitol, that was significant, and the treatment effect lasted longer where they used hypertonic saline. So again, this study, the British study, also favored hypertonic saline as compared to mannitol. And as you see, so this is the reduction in hypertonic saline, which was better than the mannitol. So this was another German study which came in 2005. So here also, if you see, efficacy of 7.2% hypertonic saline hydroxy. So if you see, these studies may not be pertinent to the type of practice we do, because they have always used combination with colloid, and we used plain hypertonic saline. So here also they've used saline with hydroxyethyl starch compared to mannitol in the treatment of increased intracranial pressure in neurosurgical patients. So this was a prospective randomized controlled trial. So they had 32 patients, 17 in hypertonic saline and 15 in mannitol. And if you see, all the observations they captured was significantly better in hypertonic saline, because the duration of reduced ICP was less than, the ICP duration was less in hypertonic saline as compared to mannitol, and the amount of ICP that was brought down was more. 57% it could bring down ICP compared to 48%. And even there was a CPP improved, because the first study you saw, there was no improvement in the CPP. Here, CPP improved significantly in hypertonic saline compared to 15% mannitol. And there was an improvement in the mean arterial pressure also in hypertonic saline. And the mean dose that was needed of hypertonic was 1.5 ml per kg. Here they used 1.8 ml per kg of mannitol. That was also statistically. Again, this German study favors hypertonic saline was far superior in reducing ICP, improving CPP, and improving the MAP. So this is the Bosks and Whisker plots. The black one is hypertonic saline. So you see improvement in the CPP is better in the hypertonic saline, and improvement in the MAP. So the dark black is the hypertonic saline. So this is an interesting French study which came after that earlier one, which disproves that hypertonic saline is superior. This is the only negative trial. It came by Franconi et al. In Critical Care Medicine in 2008. So they compared mannitol, equimolar doses of mannitol and hypertonic in treatment of intracranial pressure. So randomized controlled study. So they took 17 traumatic brain injury and 3 stroke patients. So they monitored ICP, CPP and brain tissue oxygenation. And here they recorded middle cerebral artery velocities, and they monitored arterial blood pressure, urine output, serum sodium osmolality, which is all the standard. So they recorded this, they monitored this for around 120 minutes. So this was 20, as you see, the 20 patients where ICP was more than 20 millimeter mercury, 10 in each group. So hypertonic again got 7.45% hypertonic compared to 20% mannitol. If you see, the reduction in the ICP at 60 minutes was better. More number of patients showed reduction, 45% reduction compared to 35, and improvement in the CPP happened better in the mannitol group, and reduced in the middle cerebral artery pulsatility index was more in mannitol, urine output was more in mannitol, and serum sodium was more in hypertonic. So if you see the favorable effects in this French study by Franconi et al., where he equated the osmolality was matched between the hypertonic saline and mannitol, and then did the study. It was found mannitol exercised superiority in this study. So this was the only negative study which do not favor hypertonic saline. So after this, so this came in 2008. After this, again another French study came by Chai et al. Again disproving that mannitol is superior. So here I think this is something which may be relevant to our current practice, because here they did not use combination of any colloid, and here they use sodium lactate, and they compared sodium lactate versus mannitol in the treatment of intracranial prospective randomized controlled trial. So the primary endpoint they looked at was reduction in ICP at 4 hours. Secondary endpoint was successful treatment in reducing ICP. So the sodium lactate, the serum sodium content of lactate was 504 millimoles per liter. So they took 34 patients, GCS less than 8, and sodium lactate they used at 1.5 ml per kg compared to 1.5 ml per kg of mannitol. So the reduction of ICP, as you see, was much better in sodium lactate, and the duration of ICP reduction also was much better in sodium lactate, and successful treatment of ICP happened in 90.4% compared to 70.4% in mannitol. It was statistically significant, and Glasgow outcome score also was better. So this French study disproves the previous French study which came 1 year back saying that mannitol is better. Here they use sodium lactate with a high osmolality with the increased serum sodium content of 504 millimoles as superior to mannitol. So as you see, so this is the sodium lactate, the black one, and this is the cerebral perfusion pressure. As you see, cerebral perfusion pressure was better in sodium lactate, and this white one is the mannitol. So, what is the hypothesis? How the authors hypothesized why sodium lactate was superior? The way they hypothesized was sodium lactate. I think in the previous lecture I gave about how to keep brain happier. So the brain utilizes lactate for as an energy for its, especially in traumatic brain injury. We discussed there is increased metabolic demands of the brain. So brain, in addition to utilizing glucose, it starts utilizing pyruvate, lactate, and ketones as the energy fuel. So here, by giving sodium lactate, it is considered, it is acts as a metabolic fuel for the cell survival, and increased chloride content drives the fluid out of the cells, out of the cells, and reduce and causes shrinkage of the cells, and by reducing the tonicity within the cell. So this is hypothesized as the beneficial effect of sodium lactate. And the conclusions the authors made was sodium lactate as an infusion had increased effectiveness in reducing ICP. So after this, then the huge meta-analysis came in 2011. So this was the more recent, because if you saw all the studies, most of our hypertonic saline mannitol studies ended at 2009, and this meta-analysis came by Camel et al. So here what they found is they took around 6 studies. If you look at control of ICP, as you see, the diamond favors sodium. So they took around 6 studies which we went through. It favors hypertonic saline, and when they looked at mean quantification of reduction in ICP, that also favored hypertonic saline as compared to the mannitol. So they have looked in the discussion. The authors do discuss about the limitations of this meta-analysis, and the strengths of this meta-analysis is the authors suggest that heterogeneity was mild, because any problem with meta-analysis is the heterogeneity in the studies. And authors do subscribe that Franconi et al. Study was the smallest in all of the meta-analysis study. And they do suggest the Violet et al. Study, they did not include purposely because they used different osmolality and they compared them, so they had to exclude this study. And in Violet et al., I think they had compared 7.5% HTS, which had osmolality of 361, and compared to 20% mannitol with osmolality which is less, which is around half of it, which means it is like comparing apples and oranges. That's why they had to exclude this study from the meta-analysis. These are the strengths of the meta-analysis, how they have exercised discretion as to which studies they should include, which they should not. And even the authors subscribe that they have not included this particular study which we discussed, because the study drug was titrated to the effect rather than the protocol. Okay, so which means there was a subjectivity to this study. So those were the strengths of the meta-analysis. The limitation of this meta-analysis was all the studies that were taken in meta-analysis were very small studies. So, and the adverse events were not reported in the studies that authors had taken. And the clinical effect size, 15% was favoring hypertonic saline. And for 80% of the power for these studies, they needed 100 patients in each arm. So all the studies were very small. So obviously they did not have any study with 100 patients in each arm. So these are some of the limitations. The power was less of the study. So other effects of hypertonic saline, I think as we discussed previously, because hypertonic saline sits in the blood vessel, it draws fluid from the cells, and most importantly, it is shown to reduce viscosity like mannitol, and it is shown to improve the cerebral blood flow and improve the oxygenation. And I think compared to mannitol, the authors subscribe that hypertonic saline has an ability to improve the volume status, because mannitol causes diuresis. It can cause hypovolemia in the setting of traumatic brain injury. There we have a beneficial effect with hypertonic saline. It improves the volume, and there is some immunomodulating effect that authors have hypothesized. And in patients with myocardial dysfunction, it may have a bearing on improving the cardiac output. So these are some of the other effects of hypertonic saline. So the summary of all these 7 studies, there are 6 studies for all the panelists. I would have just shown the summary. I didn't go through the whole elaborate studies. So there were 6 studies which favored hypertonic saline, and there's only one French study which came in 2008 which favored mannitol study. But when you look at meta-analysis, the meta-analysis favors hypertonic saline. So the conclusions from all the studies, what we could make is hypertonic saline appears to be more effective than mannitol in reducing ICP, improving CPP, and improving hemodynamics as compared to mannitol. But larger studies still needed to ascertain the effects of hypertonic saline on functional outcome, because what we have seen in all these studies is it is shown it will reduce ICP, it will improve the microdynamics in the brain, but whether it will all translate into the survival and neurological outcome is not been shown. So we need a bigger studies to show that. So then the question I would have asked panelists was whether we should give any osmotherapy as a continuous or bolus hypertonic saline. So this is a study from US where it showed that hypertonic saline works best when it is given as a bolus, because when you give as a bolus, there is a peak osmotic gradient which is created, which has an ability to draw more fluid from the cellular component into the blood vessels. And when you give at an infusion, these authors in current opinion, they hypothesize that it creates sustained hyperosmolar state. So there is adaptability of the cells, and the osmolar adaptability happens, and the osmolar drag into the vascular compartment does not happen, and the cell size will remain the same or revert back to normal. So so this is what they have hypothesized. There is some adaptability that sets in of this osmolar gradient being ineffective in drawing these osmoles into the intravascular compartment. So this is what this study has opined. And to rebut that study, this was a study which came from Germany, where they've used as a infusion of hypertonic saline at 12 ml per hour, and they looked at endpoints. They targeted this hypertonic saline to maintain serum sodium between 145 to 155, and to maintain osmolality, serum osmolality between 310 to 320 milliosmoles per kg. So they took 215 patients, quite a big study, where they used 3% hypertonic saline as infusions in 100 and control group 115. If you see, even as infusion, the ICP episode increase was less in hypertonic saline compared to the control group, and hospital mortality also was significantly less in hypertonic saline, and adverse events were similar. So which means to say, this study says even if used as infusion, it appears to be better than the control group. So, but for us, if you have a huge issue with ICP or severe cerebral edema, it is best to use it as a boluses. And I think in our practice, we have been using it as a boluses. So, like mannitol, my question would be, what are the precautions to be considered with hypertonic saline? Like with mannitol, hypertonic saline also can cause rebound increase in ICP when there is a breach in the blood-brain barrier, because when there is a breach in blood-brain, hypertonic saline can go sit within the cells and draw the fluid from the intravascular compartment, causing swelling of the cells. So this is postulated. I think another side effect that we should be aware when you're using hypertonic is hyperchloremic acid, because you saw the beneficial effects of chloride, like increased chloride within the cells will push the water content out of the cell. But hyperchloric acidosis, I think we recognize in ICU, can be a problem that we have to deal with. And increased osmolality more than 320, you should be cautious. Like mannitol causes shrinkage and hemolysis, so does hypertonic saline. So when patients are on osmotherapy, there can be hemoglobin drop, so maybe worthwhile considering doing LDH to see if there is hemolysis that is happening. And like mannitol, it can cause volume expansion and can cause pulmonary edema. So this is the last question that I would have asked. So is there any evidence that has shown the beneficial outcome in giving osmotic therapy in cerebral edema? So is there any evidence? So when we discussed this, so the reasoning I gave is, when I was in Australia, we never used osmotherapy as a routine. In fact, one time where initially when I had gone from India, I had written mannitol as a routine for a traumatic brain injury. My director was furious, because that is not the norm at all. So you can find out, I think in Australia, everyone had an ICP, or the stroke patients will have a bolt put in, and your hypertonic saline or osmotherapy is only titrated to the ICP. So it's never used as a routine like how we use. So this was heavily discussed in our panel discussion. I think a lot of reasons, because this panel had eminent neurologists, neurosurgeons, and intensivists. So the reasoning that was given was because of the cost implication and reduced usage of ICP monitor in our Indian practice. So we cannot risk not putting the patients, because we would be in the dark, not monitoring ICP. We wouldn't have an absolute clue. So as a blanket therapy, most of the patients without ICP, there was a conclusion made that they're better off on an osmotherapy. So we had an immense head of neuroanesthesia. So he also opined that in the absence of ICP, so if you're monitoring ICP with an ICP monitor, that's fine. You can be guided as to when you will use, when you will not use. But if you do not have ICP monitor, then we have no business in saying that we won't put osmotherapy. I think that was the conclusion drawn. So the evidence is no conclusive outcome benefit. Even in the studies with ICP monitor, use of osmotherapy shown to reduce ICP, but definitive management of some sort has to be done in the form of decompressive craniectomy or evacuation of hematoma or anything. But just by giving osmotherapy, there has been no benefit in showing that it conclusively changes your functional outcome or survival. So these are some of the studies. So in fact, there was one study from SGPGI that has come. So osmotherapy, the benefit, the authors conclude that transiently, yes, it will reduce ICP, but the harmful effects are also equally there. It can cause rebound increase in the edema. It can cause electrolyte disturbance. It can cause acute kidney injury. It can cause pulmonary edema. So the authors in these two studies have subscribed that the harm outweighs the benefit if you are just using it as a one-fold therapy. So as you know, the approach to cerebral edema is multimodal. So you have to look at preventing secondary insults and definitive management to reduce ICP in the form of evacuation of hematoma and maintaining 7 normos and maybe decompressive craniectomy. Osmotherapy is only a temporizing measure, is what authors finally conclude. So this is the last question I asked to the panelists. Any advantage over using both dual therapy of hypertonic saline and mannitol over monotherapy? So we looked into the evidence. So there is absolutely no evidence that we could come across which has compared head-to-head combination versus one therapy. So I think this question ended our panel. So I would end my talk with this quote. So growth is painful, change is painful, but nothing is as painful as staying stuck somewhere you don't belong. So I think we have been using osmotherapy as a routine. So it is about time that we try to use it little more judiciously. At least the glycerol is out. So maybe we should get away from using mannitol and maybe use more of hypertonic saline. I think we all concluded at the end that definitely hypertonic saline seems to be more promising, and most of the panelists there were using hypertonic saline, and they would add in dual therapy when when the GCS was worsening or when there was a worsening brain edema on the CT, they would throw in both. So we need to possibly conduct studies comparing dual versus monotherapy. I think we could also embark on doing a similar studies, what my interim thoughts was. So thank you very much. You can visit this website if you want to rehear to this lecture and gain clarity. Thank you.